5 years ago, my son disappeared. Not died. Not ran away. Just vanished. Erased like a word rubbed out from the page of my life. There was no warning. No argument. No slammed door. One day he was calling me about groceries, about rent, about how the world was both too fast and too small. The next day, nothing. Silence where there should have been his voice. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A lost phone, a bad signal, the kind of temporary silence that ends with an apology and a laugh. But the silence stretched. One day became two. Two became a week. Then a month. His phone disconnected. His social media deleted. His apartment empty. Stripped bare except for a single mug in the sink and the faint outline of his bed against the floorboards. When I reported it, the officer didn't look surprised. He tapped on his computer, filled out a form and said, "He's an adult, ma'am. He can choose to disappear if he wants to." I remember the way his pen clicked, sharp, final. As if those words, that small legal truth, were enough to seal a coffin. But how do you call disappearance a choice? How do you label abandonment as freedom? For weeks, I drove across the city, his old haunts, coffee shops, record stores, the park bench by the lake where he used to read. I asked strangers if they'd seen him. Most shook their heads politely. A few lied, offering false hope in soft voices. Maybe I saw him near the train station. Every night I'd come home to the same dark kitchen, the same untouched mail, the same flicker of the porch light I'd left on like a prayer. I'd sit at the table, stare at my phone, and scroll through old messages just to remind myself that once he'd existed in words. "Love you, Mom. Call you tomorrow." That was the last one. Tomorrow never came. I printed flyers with his face. Blue background, cropped too close because I didn't know how to design hope. I posted them on every pole, every bulletin board, every gas station window that would take them. Rain washed half of them away. Wind tore the rest. Each missing poster was a promise unkept. People stopped making eye contact after a while. Friends grew quieter. Their voices softened when they said his name, as if grief was contagious. Some said, maybe he just needed space. Others, you have to let him go. But mothers don't let go. Not of their children. Not of the idea that love can anchor someone even when the tide pulls them away. Sometimes I'd think I saw him. A flash of familiar shoulders in a crowd. A silhouette crossing the street. I'd call out, my heart breaking into a run, only to realize it was a stranger. Then came the shame of hope, that cruel aftertaste of being wrong again. The seasons turned indifferent. Summer became winter, became summer again. Time stretched, thin as paper, translucent enough to see through but impossible to hold. I stopped counting holidays. Birthdays passed like ghosts. I kept his room the same. The sheets changed weekly, though no one slept in them. The window stayed cracked so the air would move, because I couldn't bear the thought of his world going stale. At night, I'd hear sounds, creaks, whispers of movement, and think maybe it was him. Once, I swore I heard footsteps outside the door. I opened it so fast I bruised my hand, but the porch was empty except for the wind and the echo of my own breath. The police stopped returning my calls. They'd done their part. To them, he was another case without evidence. Another adult who had chosen to step away. They said the same line every time. He's not a missing person, ma'am. He's a grown man. As if growing older meant you stopped belonging to anyone. I started collecting theories instead of answers. Maybe he joined a commune. Maybe he changed his name. Maybe he'd been hurt. Maybe he'd hurt himself. The word maybe became the ghost I lived with, a constant presence that followed me into sleep and back out again. I learned the strange rituals of grief without closure. How to talk to someone who isn't there. How to celebrate birthdays without candles. How to sit in silence long enough for it to sound like prayer. His father had been gone for years, another kind of disappearance, one that left scars but at least came with a body. David was all I had left that tethered me to something good, something pure. And now even that was gone. 5 years. That's how long it took for people to stop asking about him. They stopped saying his name, as if that made it easier for me. As if the absence of his name erased the absence of him. But I never stopped. Every day, Before leaving for work, I'd whisper it under my breath like a benediction. David. I'd say it when I passed the photo on the mantel, the one where he's standing by the river, head tilted, half-smile caught between boy and man. That picture became my map back to hope. And then, one morning, just another morning like all the others, I saw him. At least, I thought I did. I was in another town, visiting a bookstore I'd never been to before. I don't know why I went in. Maybe because I was tired, maybe because the smell of paper and dust always reminded me of the afternoons we used to spend reading together. And there he was, a young man by the display shelf sorting through books. His hair a little longer, his shoulders broader, but the tilt of his head, that small, familiar habit, made my heart forget how to beat. For a second, I couldn't move. My hands shook, my throat closed, and before I could stop myself, I said his name. David. He turned, and in that instant, that single, impossible instant, I saw something I'd never seen in my son before. Fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. His eyes met mine, and instead of recognition or relief, there was panic, like an animal caught in light. Then, without a word, he bolted toward the back of the store, disappearing through a side door before I could reach him. I called out again, louder this time, but he was gone. Gone like before. When I asked the clerk who he was, they blinked in confusion. There's no one here like that, they said. No one working today who looks like that. I wanted to believe them, but the air still carried his scent, that faint mix of soap and the world outside. I left the store trembling, hands clutching the strap of my bag as if it could keep me from unraveling. For the first time in 5 years, my grief had shape again. A face, a body, a possibility. I walked the streets of that town until night fell, half hoping I'd see him again, half terrified I would. When I got home that evening, the house felt different. Quieter, but not empty, as if the silence was holding its breath. That's when I knew the search wasn't over. It never had been. Because the truth about disappearance is this: it doesn't end when someone is declared gone. It ends when the living stop believing they can still be found. And I hadn't stopped believing. Not yet. Couldn't sleep that night. The image of him in the bookstore played on a loop. The way his shoulders stiffened when he heard his name. The flicker of fear that replaced recognition. The sound of his footsteps vanishing behind the shelves. For 5 years I dreamed of that moment. Of finding him. Of pulling him into my arms. Of hearing him say, "I'm sorry, Mom." But the reunion I'd imagined didn't happen. It was replaced by something colder, sharper. Fear. And not just his. Mine too. By morning I was already driving back to that town. It was 2 hours away, a quiet place off the main highway, the kind of town where the streets all seemed to lead back to the same square. The sky was low and gray, the air heavy with the smell of rain. The bookstore was small, wedged between a bakery and an antique shop. When I stepped inside, the bell above the door rang, the sound painfully bright. Everything looked exactly the same as the day before, the same stacks of novels, the same soft yellow light. Only he wasn't there. I asked the clerk again, a woman with a kind but distracted face. "Do you have a young man working here? Brown hair, tall, maybe mid-20s. She frowned. "No, ma'am. It's just me and my husband. And we don't have any sons." Her tone wasn't dismissive, it was frightened, like someone carefully closing a door on a subject she didn't want to discuss. I thanked her and left, but not before glancing toward the back of the store where he had disappeared. There was a narrow hallway leading to an emergency exit. I pushed the door open and stepped outside. The alley behind the building smelled of wet cardboard and something faintly chemical, like bleach. No sign of him, no footprints. Nothing but a trash bin and the hum of a compressor. I stood there until the rain started. Driving home, the world felt distorted. Colors too bright, sounds too sharp. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Had I imagined him? Had grief twisted itself into hallucination? But the look in his eyes, that unmistakable panic, no memory could invent that. When I got home, I went straight to the boxes in the attic where I'd stored his things. The dust rose like ghosts when I lifted the lids. Old notebooks, a broken camera, a half-finished letter addressed to no one. And then, at the bottom of one box, a small flash drive taped to the inside of a folder. I didn't remember putting it there. I plugged it into my laptop. The screen blinked. Inside were a few image files and one text document titled, "He Sees Me Everywhere." The photos looked like surveillance stills. Grainy **TS of streets, parking lots, dark hallways. And in almost every image, a man stood just at the edge of the frame. Older, tall, wearing a gray coat. His face blurred, always turned slightly away. My breath caught. The images were dated the year David disappeared. I opened the note. "He sees me everywhere. I think he knows I'm trying to leave. If something happens, don't trust anyone who says they can help." That was all. No signature, no explanation. But the handwriting was his. I sat there for a long time, the glow of the screen washing over me like cold light. The words felt alive. Trembling, warning, pleading from another world. When I finally stood, my legs shook. I called Michael, one of David's college friends. We hadn't spoken in years. The line rang 5 times before he answered. "Layla?" His voice was cautious. "I saw David," I said. "Yesterday. In a bookstore." Silence stretched across the line. "Layla? Are you sure?" "Yes." He looked different, older, but it was him. "And he ran when he saw me." Another pause. I could hear him breathing, slow and uneasy. "I think I know who he's with," he said finally. Back in college, David started spending time with this older guy. Professor, I think. Connors. He wasn't faculty exactly, more like an independent researcher. Always hanging around the department. People said he helped students with grants, networking, that kind of thing. "And you think this man?" "He was controlling. Always around David. They were close in a weird way. When David stopped coming to class, Connors disappeared too." "What kind of person was he?" Michael's voice dropped lower. "The kind that makes you feel watched even when you're alone." We agreed to talk again the next day, to share what we remembered. But when I called him that night, the line went straight to voicemail. The following morning, his number was disconnected. That was when the messages started. The first one came to my email, no sender, no subject. Just 3 words. "Stop searching, Layla." The second came to my phone later that night. "Unknown number. You don't know what you're walking into." I went to the police. They listened politely, wrote a few notes, and promised to look into it. But I could see it in their eyes. The same quiet disbelief they'd had 5 years ago. One officer asked if I'd considered therapy. I left before I said something I'd regret. That evening, I sat in the living room with the flash drive beside me, replaying every image, every word, every flicker of shadow on the screen. The man in the gray coat seemed to be everywhere. In a cafe window, at a bus stop, reflected in glass behind David's face. "He sees me everywhere." The words pulsed in my head like a heartbeat. Who was Connors? And what did he want from my son? I tried to trace him online. Nothing. No social media, no records, no articles. It was as if he didn't exist. By midnight, the house felt smaller, the air too still. Every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. I locked every door, pulled every curtain closed, but the feeling didn't fade. I kept seeing that moment in the bookstore, his face when he turned, that flicker of terror. He hadn't looked like someone who didn't recognize me. He'd looked like someone who wasn't allowed to. Somewhere between fear and fury, I made my decision. If no one else would help me, I'd find someone who would. That's when I found the name Jesse White. A private investigator, ex-cop, quiet reputation, small office 2 towns over. When I met him, he didn't talk much. Just listened, his pen scratching notes while I told the story from the beginning. When I showed him the flash drive, he frowned. "These pictures," he said, "they look like surveillance stills from a handheld camera. Someone was following your son." "I think it was this Connors," I said. "Maybe," he murmured. "Or maybe someone following Connors. Either way, we'll find out." He handed me his card. "You'll hear from me soon." That night, for the first time in years, I felt something close to purpose. Not peace, peace is too fragile, but direction. Because now the search had a shape, a name. A man in a gray coat who saw my son everywhere. And if he saw David, then I would find him. No matter what it cost. Jesse called 2 days after I handed him the flash drive. His voice was low, deliberate, the way men speak when they know each word might disturb something sleeping. I went back to the bookstore, he said. You're not crazy. There's a service door behind the stacks that opens to a hallway, and the hallway ends in a steel door with a coded lock. The clerk says it's storage. It isn't. Did you get inside? Not yet, but I saw someone use it. Tall, gray coat. Your man. I felt the house tilt. A slow slide of gravity toward a truth I wasn't ready to hold. I carried the phone into David's room and sat on the edge of his bed, where the sun laid a square of light like a permission slip I never signed. What next? I asked. We don't push a locked door without knowing what's on the other side. We map the routine. If Connors is still in play, he has a rhythm. People like that worship rhythm. They use it to trap others. Others. Your son isn't the only one who disappears when a man like that is nearby. After the call, I printed every photo from the flash drive and taped them to the wall of the room that still smelled faintly of his shampoo. I circled the gray coat in red. I drew lines where the backgrounds matched. Bus stop, glass awning, the storefront with the cracked letter O. That O became my compass. I started to see it everywhere, on a dentist sign, on a laundromat window, stamped into the lid of a trash bin. I knew it was my mind making meaning, but meaning was all I had. Michael's number remained dead. I tried his email. No response. I tried another friend, Elena, who once studied with them at the library until dawn. She answered on the second ring, hope brightening into panic as I told her everything. Connors? She said, whispering. He's still around? You knew him. We all knew of him. He wasn't a professor. He was a benefactor. He watched. He watched for boys and girls who were hungry, for opportunity, for attention, and then he offered both. Grants, recommendations, access to labs after hours, private conversations that made you feel like the only name on earth. And then, after enough dinners and favors, he charged a price you didn't see coming. What price? Isolation, she said. He made you choose him over the rest of us. He called it focus. I asked if she'd talked to Jesse. She agreed and then forgot how to breathe when I mentioned the stills. Please be careful, she said. Connors never raised his voice. He never needed to. That night a new message arrived. You're trespassing in a story you don't understand. No sender. No signature. When I replied, the message bounced back as if I'd thrown a stone and found only my own window. The police were boredom in a uniform. I brought the printouts, the note from the flash drive, the timeline I'd drawn in the shape of a net. The detective skimmed it as if it were a menu and shrugged like nothing looked good. Ms. Harris, he said, patient with the kind of patience that has expiration dates. There's no evidence of a crime here. Your son left on his own. These photos could be anyone. And the messages, well, the internet breeds cowards. So you'll do nothing. We'll keep a file. Files are where hope goes to nap forever. Jesse did not keep a file. He kept a notebook and a pair of eyes that made silence confess. He put me on speaker while he sat in his car across from the bookstore, windows cracked, a thermos steaming in the cup holder. 2 clerks, he murmured. Same as before. Husband. Wife. They talk with their shoulders. That's fear. No gray coat yet. A kid in a hoodie came through the alley twice. Watches the door. Doesn't go in. That's a runner. He takes orders. From who? Someone who taught him that doors are either for the chosen or the punished. I didn't understand until he said it more plainly. Someone like Connors. I started my own surveillance, the small, desperate kind that women perform without training. Cataloging faces, memorizing cars, listening for footsteps that carry certainty instead of doubt. I traced my days through grocery aisles and church foyers, through the park where David once learned to ride a bike and fell laughing into grass. Everywhere I walked, I felt watched. Not the unhinged feeling of paranoia, but the steady prickle of being measured by a man who considered himself a scale. The next afternoon, I found a white envelope on my porch. No stamp, no address, just my name in tidy block letters that hated curves. Inside, one photograph, printed on matte paper. A picture of me standing by the bookstore window, my hand on the glass, my mouth saying his name. On the back, in the same tidy hand, "Love is a leash if you hold it too tight." I made tea and couldn't drink it. My hands shook too much. I called Jesse. He came to the house with a small camera case and the dry smell of rain on his jacket. "We're past warnings," he said, studying the photo. "Now he's staging the lesson." "What lesson?" "That you don't control endings." He walked the perimeter, noting everything I'd stopped seeing. The low bush where someone could crouch, the soft mulch that recorded footfalls like an obedient clerk. He installed a doorbell camera. He left a cheap burner phone and told me to use it only for him. "If you see the gray coat, call. Don't confront. Connors won't shout. He'll persuade. He'll talk in circles until your feet forget how to leave." "David trusted him," I said, as if it were a confession. "People like Connors recruit from the faithful," he answered. "That's the trick. Faith looks like love if you blur your eyes." I burned dinner that night and ate it anyway, every bite a dare. The house felt like a museum where the plaques had been removed. The past was unlabeled, the present suspicious, the future a wing under renovation with no opening date posted. Elena texted late. I tried Michael's apartment. Empty. No forwarding. Neighbor said he went home, but couldn't say where home was. Then she sent a second message that did not blink for a while. "Layla, he asked me once if I ever felt like someone was narrating my life to me. Like every decision suddenly belonged to a script I didn't write. That's how it starts. You don't notice you're not the author until the chapter ends and you don't remember typing." I printed that too. I put it beside the stills, a museum of warnings. Jesse slept in his car 2 more nights and watched the alley. On the 3rd, he called while I was folding laundry. I would have folded better if my son were coming home to wear it. "Movement," he said. "Gray suit tonight, not a coat. Same posture. He's older. Neat. He walks like he practiced being harmless." "Do you have him?" "I have a pattern. He arrives right before closing, disappears through the coded door, comes out 40 minutes later. The clerks don't look at him. That's obedience, not ignorance." "Can we get in?" "Not without probable cause or a mistake. We'll wait for the mistake." The mistake arrived in the form of a delivery. 2 boxes carried into the alley by the husband, 1 box by the wife, the 3rd box balanced on the coded door just long enough for Jesse to watch the keypad flash. 4 digits. 2 pauses. A rhythm. He filmed the whole thing. He texted me a still frame. Got the sequence. I wanted to run from my house all the way to the town and slap the numbers into the door myself. Instead, I pressed my hands into my knees and swore I would not become the error that ruined the plan. That evening the burner rang. A voice I didn't know, smooth as a hallway light. "Ms. Harris?" The voice said, "This hunt you've made of your grief, does it help you sleep?" I said nothing. "I can make the dreaming stop," the voice continued. "But you have to understand that love is not ownership. Your son learned that. Perhaps you will too." "Who is this?" A soft chuckle. "A man who prefers endings." "Connors," I said. "Say your name." He sighed, and I could hear a smile spread thin. "Names are for people who require introductions. You already know me." The line clicked dead. I could smell the plastic heat of the phone, the panic inside it. I called Jesse, my voice small, the world too loud. He called me. "Good," he said. "He's confident. Confidence turns locks. Or K*LLS people." He said nothing to that. We met in the parking lot behind the bakery next door to the bookstore. It was late. The streets wore their emptiness like a robe. Jesse handed me a cap and told me to keep my head down. He gave me a role I could survive. Observer in a car, engine off, hand on the burner. "If anything happens to you," I said, throat tight, "I'll never forgive myself." He smiled with one corner of his mouth, a scar of a smile. "If anything happens to me, you'll forgive yourself forever. That's how these stories work." We waited. The clerks closed. The alley went still. The coded door blinked like an eye that forgot to sleep. And then he came. Gray suit, careful shoes, a face that would not stick if you tried to draw it. He moved like a man who expected the sidewalk to apologize for being beneath him. Jesse slipped from the car, all shadow and calm. He crossed the alley, pressed the sequence he'd memorized, and the door accepted him as if he belonged. It closed behind him with a cough. I counted breaths. 20, 30, a minute, 2. Somewhere inside the wall a compressor throbbed like a slow, indifferent heart. I pressed the burner to my cheek as if it could cool me. The door opened. Not Jessie. A young woman with gray around the eyes and a hoodie tied too tight. She looked at me without seeing me and kept walking, a ghost late to her own escape. Then Jessie emerged, phone to his ear, voice a whisper not meant for me. Rooms, he said. Plural. One with cots, one with chairs, one with nothing but a whiteboard. He's here. I saw him. Your son. My hand found the door handle and squeezed so hard the metal cried. Was he alive? Jessie said. Thin. Alert. He looked at me the way men in caves look at the first crack of light. And Connors. In a room with him. Calm. Teaching a lesson to no one. He likes an audience, even if he has to invent one. What do? We give him one he can't control, Jessie said. I'm calling someone I trust. Real badge. No speeches. I closed my eyes. For the first time in 5 years, hope didn't bruise when I held it. It just burned. Jessie moved like a man who'd rehearsed this moment in another life. He made 2 calls from the alley, both short, both to people who didn't need explanations. Then he came back to the car and looked me in the eyes the way a surgeon does before the anesthetic, firm, human, unflinching. Stay in the car, he said. I won't leave. Good. If something goes wrong, call this number. He slid a second card across the seat. A captain's name. A direct line. The town had folded into itself. Stores dark, windows reflecting nothing but their own glass. The bakery's sign buzzed, an insect trapped in neon, while the coated door kept its little red vigil in the alley. Somewhere, a dog barked once and thought better of it. I kept thinking of the first time David rode a bike without training wheels. He pedaled into the long brightness of the street while I ran behind, palms hovering a breath away from his ribs. When he was steady, I let go. He didn't notice. He laughed. That was how letting go was supposed to feel. This letting go had teeth. Jessie's trusted badge arrived without lights. A ghost-colored sedan that parked 2 blocks away and exhaled 3 men in plain clothes. The tallest one approached Jessie with the restrained urgency of someone who had buried careers for less. They did not waste words. Captain Rivas, Jessie said when he brought him over. Layla Harris. Rivas nodded. Ma'am, is my son inside? Your investigator says he saw him. That's enough for me to move quiet. Quiet meant no sirens. No radios crackling the future into panic. Quiet meant paperwork later and stakes now. They split, one to the rear, one to the front, one to stay with me in case quiet became aftermath. Rivas watched the alley door like a clock. If he's the kind who believes he's a teacher, he murmured, he'll be lecturing. Men like that talk right through their own arrests. It happened quick and slow, the way accidents and miracles do. Rivas and Jessie slipped through the code and were gone. Minutes collected like water. The man left with me. Moreno, thick hands, soft eyes, kept scanning the street while pretending to breathe normally. Do you have kids? I asked. He nodded once. 2. Then you know. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. When the door finally opened, it was because somebody inside forgot to be careful. A scrape. A hinge surrendering a sound. Moreno spoke into his collar, and the alley swallowed him too. I was alone with the car's cooling clicks and a dozen prayers I no longer trusted. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and tried not to throw up. The flash drive was in my coat pocket like a small hard heart. I held it and thought of the note. He sees me everywhere. I wondered if he saw me now. Then everything moved. 2 figures first, young, uncertain, eyes swollen by fluorescent hunger, guided fast down the hall by Moreno. They hesitated at the threshold of the night as if fresh air were a trick. He touched their shoulders and said something only gentleness can translate. They ran. Another body appeared, David's height, David's weight, but I didn't breathe until he turned. He turned. For half a second he was the boy from the river photograph, chin tilted, the idea of a smile trying to remember itself. Then he saw me and flinched, not away, but inward, like bracing for a wave. Mom! My name in his mouth had edges again. I slammed the car door into my own knee, stumbled, kept going, reached him, checked his face for all the injuries I'd invented in absence. He was thinner, yes. His eyes were older. But nothing else had been taken that couldn't be returned with food and sleep and time. I touched his cheek. I'm here. He nodded, swallowed. I know. Behind him, voices rose. A calm one and a patient one, and then a third made of metal. Connors stepped into the alley like a number appearing at the end of a long equation. Gray suit, unremarkable face. The kind of man your eyes reject while your life is rearranged. Rivas stood between him and the night. Sir, you're coming with us. Connors didn't argue. He smiled the way men smile when they think you've misread the chapter. Captain, he said, these young people are my guests. They come and go as they please. If they choose to leave, they may. If they choose to stay, they do. You've got coated locks, Rivas said. A necessity. We host rare collections. You've got cots. Fatigue happens in scholarship. You've got cameras aimed inward, not out. For safety. And you've got a mother, Rivas said, pointing at me without turning, who has been buried alive for 5 years. That ends tonight. There are moments when the world answers itself. This was one. Connors saw the direction his evening had chosen and adjusted his posture the way a snake adjusts its shape to a jar. I'm a mentor, he said. I protect potential from mediocrity. Jesse finally spoke from behind him, voice flat. You isolate. You rewrite names. You *p*nize dependence and call it guidance. Connors shrugged. You gave them back their noise. In a week, they'll beg me to quiet it. Rivas cuffed him. The steel made a sound like punctuation. The words stopped. David watched, expression exhausted. He told me, he whispered, that you wanted to stop me, that you were frightened of who I could become. He said love is the most elegant form of sabotage. I took his hands. They were cold. He lied to you with language, I said. Of course it sounded beautiful. That's how poison passes inspection. He nodded, then wavered. His knees folded a little, and I was suddenly holding the weight I'd been carrying for half a decade. Only now it had mass and warmth and the tremble of a living pulse. Moreno appeared on my other side, solid as the curb, and between us we kept David on his feet. We got him into the car. He stared at the dashboard like it was a horizon. He touched the vent, the glove box, the fraying seam by the radio, the reliquary of an ordinary life. He let out a sound that was not quite a laugh and not yet a sob. Breathe, I said. He did. Once, twice, a third time like surf reforming. Rivas leaned in. Paramedics are on the way. He's not the only one, ma'am. There were 2 others. And a third who wouldn't give a name. Will they be okay? They will be free, he said. The rest is theirs. Connors passed the car window as they walked him to the sedan. He glanced at me, an academic taking attendance, then offered a small nod, as if we had both completed an exam only he could grade. You'll be back, he murmured through the glass, lips barely moving. They always come back when the world is loud. I looked at David. Will you? He held my gaze. No. They put Connors in the car. The alley exhaled. Jesse stepped to my window and rested his arms on the frame. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked tired in a way that had no future in it. You did it, I said. He shook his head. You refused to stop. I just turned the right keys. The paramedics checked David in the overlit calm of people who measure the body's confusion and call it by gentle names. Pulse, pressure, pupils, all the tiny gates between harm and home. They cleared him to leave but handed me a card with phone numbers that begin the slow work after rescue, the work without sirens. We drove. Not fast. Not triumphant. Just forward. David stared out the window as the town surrendered to fields, then to highway. He spoke without looking at me. I kept seeing you, he said. Everywhere. In glass, in crowds, in words other people used. He said that meant you were unfinished in me. He said I had to finish you. How? By choosing silence. By deleting. By obeying the idea that love is a threat. Traffic passed like thought. He turned, finally, and everything I'd been holding fell out of my eye. I'm sorry, he said. You're safe, I answered. Is that the same thing? Not yet, I said. But it's the road to it. At home, the porch light was still on, habit disguised as ritual. He paused at the threshold and smiled without teeth. I used to dream of this door. In the dream, I couldn't remember how the lock worked. I handed him the key. He turned it. The house received him the way a book accepts the return of a lost page. Quietly, completely. We didn't talk much that night. He showered. He ate. He slept on sheets that remembered his weight. Every time the floor creaked, I sat up, then lay down again, learning the new geography of a house with breath in it. In the morning, I woke before the sun and waited in the kitchen for sounds that belonged to the living. Cabinets, water, a throat clearing. He came in wearing my old flannel and the look of a traveler who had crossed out of a country with no maps. He poured coffee. He sat. He touched my wrist like a man testing the temperature of hope. Every morning, I said, I listened for your voice. I'm listening now. He looked out the window where day was relearning its own name. He said you were afraid of my life. I think I was afraid of it, too. We'll be afraid together, I said. And then we'll be brave. He nodded. The light found his face and made a small church of it. We sat there and let the ordinary happen to us, cup by cup, minute by minute, until the house remembered how to be a home. Somewhere, paperwork formed around Connors like ice. Somewhere, statements compiled and charges arranged themselves into paragraphs. Somewhere, other mothers held photographs and waited to be told which part of their children was still recoverable. I can't fix that. I can make breakfast. I can learn the sound of his steps again. And I can ask you this, because stories don't end, they offer a mirror. When the person you love disappears into someone else's idea of them, how long do you keep the porch light on?